Hi everyone, my name is Mahi and welcome to the first episode of Candid Talks, the show where we dive deep into the journey of incredibly accomplished individuals in their respective fields. We're talking educators, we're talking teachers, principals, counselors, you name it. You know their success, you know the tags and the titles they've gained from their success, but do you really know their story? Do you know what happened, what steps they had to take in order to get to where they are today, the journey that they had to go through? This is exactly what we're going to be uncovering in every single episode. My first guest today is a woman who's had an incredible career in counseling spanning up to 16 years. It's incredible. She's helped numerous individuals make some huge decisions about their lives. She's extended their supports in emotional well-being as well as social well-being, all the exciting things to help a person out live their best life. But you know what makes her story even more special? The experiences she's had to go through in order to get to where she is. And I've had the honor of just gaining a small glimpse into her story, and I'm here to uncover the full truth here today with all of you, because some of you may be in her position, and I hope her story inspires you to get up and get going and know that you're not alone, because I think a lot of us need to hear that message. So let's welcome my first guest today, Miss Katrina Watson.
Hey Mahi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling fantastic. Thank you for that beautiful introduction, and it's a pleasure to be here today.
No worries. You were our first guest on the show. How does that make you feel? Is it like kind of daunting?
I feel very honored and very excited. I had no idea that I was first guest, but that makes it even more exciting and special for our conversation today.
Amazing. Before I get started, I've been sort of kind of had an inkling of seeing this too. I love your name, by the way. I think it's such a cinematic name. I feel like you could be a part of like the Avengers or something with that name because you just have like such a main character name. I love
Oh,
your name.
thank you. Thank
Anyways,
you so much. I always grew up like thinking I had such a different name than everybody else. So as an adult, hearing that people love my name, people love elements about me, it just is full circle moment. So thank you for saying that.
no worries. All right, I'm really excited to dive deep into multiple areas of your life. We're going to talk about your career as a counselor, but I want you to know that's not going to be like my focal point of this conversation. Of course, we're going to talk about how you got into it, but I really want to focus more on your journey up into getting till here because I heard your story at the 10th Career Counselor Awards and Conference that happened earlier this year in Feb. I was really inspired by it, although I caught just like a small glimpse into it. And I think it's so inspiring for me to hear like actual people talk about how they sort of took this huge leap of faith and did something for themselves for once. So I really want to get into all of that. But before we get started, let's talk about, you're a California girl at heart. You're from Southern California, SoCal. You grew up in LA, amazing. It was like, I think everyone just sort of has this image about California in their mind. So I think everyone's always like, oh my God, that's so crazy. You grew up in LA. What's that like? So I'm really curious to know, growing up in LA in that time, with the sort of LA being the hub for like pop culture and cinema and movies and like fashion, like retro, Y2K, all the exciting stuff. I want to know, what was that like in your childhood? Were you inspired by any of those elements that you sort of carried with you going forward?
Absolutely. Everybody will ask me because I don't live in LA anymore, but people ask me all the time, almost daily, like, why would you leave California? Why would you leave Los Angeles? Everyone's trying to go there. And the simple answer is although every opportunity can feel like it's there, I didn't feel like my opportunities were there. But growing up there, I will say that it was a very, wonderful childhood, wonderful upbringing that I had in many ways. Even though there were difficult times throughout my childhood, I would say that overall it was a fantastic place to grow up. I grew up there in the 90s and in the early 2000s, and I look back during that time and it was an exciting time. It was kind of before all the social media, Facebook, Instagram, and what we know today, TikTok and everything else, wasn't really happening yet. So, connections, friendships, opportunities, they were what they were at that time, much more simpler. And so I think that I kind of was on that generation of the last, um, I guess, tip of the iceberg before things
Mm,
transitioned into this really, just well connected world we have today. So, in a way, it kind of just was like a frozen in time experience. I didn't even have a cell phone until I was 18, So it was one of those time periods that many people in my age group can probably relate to. But kind of going back to your question, I was definitely influenced by a lot of, entertainment culture, as you mentioned. And I always thought I wanted to go into film and TV, and that was something that, we see every day of our life, whether it's through news or, reality shows or whatever that looked like. And so I was naturally drawn towards that. And I thought, oh, I want to be famous and have my own TV show and all of the above, like what we all think about as a kid. And I was always that, kind of outgoing girl. I had a lot of friends in different circles. I was a cheerleader. I was in the theater group. I was, in the different dance organizations. I was even just, a regular girl that just wanted to just fit in at the end of the
mm.
day. So I was just a normal girl with a simple upbringing, but I had a lot of passions and interests, and that was an exciting time in my life. And so as I progressed and got older, I still tried to figure out what I wanted to do. I actually ended up working in, a corporate America for a bit for entertainment. And I worked with the radio stations in Los Angeles and did promotions with them and met a lot of interesting people, worked with celebrities, and that was quite exciting. But I still felt like something was missing. And
Wow. So you said you work with celebrities. I mean, LA is such a, like an entertainment hub, as you say, you got the Sunset Boulevard, you got the Strip, you got all the fancy things going on with like music as well. And it's amazing that you say you worked with celebrities as well. Did you ever have a moment where you were like really starstruck, or are you like good at like keeping your composure?
Well, that's a great question. Naturally people would think, oh my God, you're working with celebrities, but I normalized it. I normalized it. It
Yeah.
became a part of my normal experience. And so, if anything, um, sometimes I didn't know the celebrity. So it kind of made it a little bit easier, or I wasn't like a fan of their work. I just kind of knew them as their name and maybe some of the accolades that they achieved. So it kind of was a normal experience. And kind of growing up in Los Angeles, especially in the areas that I lived in, celebrities lived in the neighborhood. They'd go to the local eateries. I mean, it was kind of like it was just embedded in the culture. And so I didn't really make a big deal out of those experiences. However, if there were certain celebrities, yeah, I might have had a fangirl moment for sure.
That's amazing. Do you ever feel like Los Angeles, I feel, did you ever have the feeling that it kind of limited you to your potential and to what you could definitely achieve compared to now that you're here in Dubai?
Yeah, definitely. There were many moments where I just felt like I was meant for something bigger and it wasn't there in Los Angeles or California. And so that was a transitional point in my life where I had to figure out what's next, where's next, do I stay here, do I leave everyone and everything that I know? I didn't have a lot of opportunities growing up to really travel extensively throughout the world, but I had gone abroad a few times, but very limited amount. So it was definitely a crossroads of my life, figuring out what's next and where's next. And so we'll get into that, I'm sure.
Yeah, we will. But before we get into all the nitty-gritty stuff, I really wanted to ask you this question, but I feel like I can't wait any longer to ask you. It's that I read somewhere that when you were planning on moving to Dubai, first of all, I was thinking the same thing as many other people. What their perspective would be like, you left America, you left USA, you left LA, like fancy place for like all the fancy people and opportunities. It may be a misconception, I've never been there before, but sometimes I do believe it's a misconception. Do you feel like also like kind of achieving this big goal of moving abroad without any support or while everyone's against the idea, how did you like get through that? How did you sort of, it's like a big deal trying to do something for yourself. So what was that like for you?
So I'm a person that has very strong intuition. And so for people that maybe can relate to that or not relate to that, that was something I had to heavily lean into, was really letting my intuition guide me through a lot of unknowns and really trusting myself and having my own back. I think part of my story that you heard back in February was I kind of had to just grow up on my own and grow up fast. I came from a single parent household. So intuitively, I had to learn how to harness that skill from a very young age. And so when it came to this decision of moving abroad, I jumped on it, to be honest, because nothing was working for me. But deep down, as you may know, we'll get into it more, is I just knew I didn't want to be there. I knew I didn't want to be in California. It just got to a point where it was just like, there's something else for me out there. There's something calling me elsewhere. And I don't know what that looks like. And when the opportunity came for Dubai, it was almost like it was almost like a no-brainer. It was almost like a done deal. It was almost just like inevitable, and it made sense. And all the puzzle pieces just kind of fit perfectly together, even when I didn't know what to expect, even when I had never visited the region, even when I knew not one soul in that city or country. I just knew that that's where I had to be.
That's incredible. It's also like it's nice to see like different, fresh perspectives, you know. So a lot of us we crave to go to America, but sometimes when you're from America, you're like, I want to go somewhere else. This is not working for me. That's really exciting. I've also been curious, how has summer break been for you? Have you been on summer break? Have you done anything exciting?
Yeah, absolutely. So summer break, it's a time for many working professionals in the field to just um, take time for themselves and cultivate that sense of like what's important to them. And for me, reconnecting with people that I love, traveling, spending time on projects that are important to me, that's a time where I really cherish and value these things. And so for me, I told myself the second I go on summer break, every moment of it, even when it doesn't feel good or when it's hard or when I don't feel like doing something or all the feels, I'm going to enjoy it no matter what. And I look back, it went so fast. And I got to go visit multiple countries and visit new places. I went home to Los Angeles, California, visited and reconnected with family and friends, and it was just such a wonderful time and a moment where I want to just freeze the time and relish in it a little longer, but then all things have to kind of go back to, normalcy of work. So it was great.
That's amazing. So now let's go back to where your journey entirely started. You know, we spoke about your couple of current years of like getting into counseling and stuff like that. It's kind of like the tip of the iceberg. Let's go back to where everything started for you, which is your childhood in Southern California. You know, as you've mentioned previously, you've had kind of a tumultuous childhood growing up. It wasn't the easiest. So could you give us a little bit more insight into what that was like for you?
Sure, absolutely. So, growing up, I did not have the traditional family structure, and this is something that I talk about a lot with, different people. And I shared this back in February. Is I didn't come from what we all considered a traditional family structure with two parents and a white picket fence and all of that. So, I grew up in a single parent household. My mom, worked multiple jobs to support me and her. I didn't have any siblings. My dad was in and out of prison and dabbling in things he shouldn't have. And so growing up, I was constantly in chaos and dysfunction and fight or flight and figuring things out and trying to just survive. So we call that survival mode, right? And so my mom did work in education, so that was kind of always something I was seeing, and she kind of did the teacher route and all of that. So I was familiar with all of this. Um, she never was really around to give me, guidance or, she never was able to afford opportunities for me to do a lot of extracurriculars. I could only pick like one or maybe two. And, with costs and things, it was mostly, very limited. So I was not your, perfect picture poster child. I had average grades. My opportunities felt limited because I had no one there to guide me and give me the advice that I would give to my own students back in that time. But through all of that, I decided, I was on the right path, and I stayed out of trouble. I had many opportunities to go off on a different path. And somehow, like I said, that intuition, that anchor inside of me kept me grounded and on a good path. And it kept allowing beautiful opportunities to come my way. And going to college was a conversation piece, but it wasn't like you must go to college or else. It was like, I'm going to support you no matter what you do decide. And so naturally I applied to college. I just thought, let me see what happens. I applied to 5 universities. I like to put that out there, and I only got into 2. Um, and that had nothing to do with my grades or anything. It came to my confidence, what I think I was capable of at the time, because nobody was there to support me in that process. I kind of had to figure it out on my own. And so I share that because we can talk about that later. But so I went to college, tried to figure out the college thing on my own. Again, as soon as I started working, I was cut off financially, so I had to, pay for my way forward. And things were just difficult, and I had to figure it out, and it took a lot of trial and error, trusting the right mentors along the way, and believing in myself ultimately. And
That's something I definitely wanted to get into because I tried to think from your perspective at one point, and I was like, what is it that sort of you have to put yourself through in order to really get that life you want for yourself? Something I've noticed is a lot of teens and young adults they go through is, especially if you live with your parents, it's like trying to be more self-sufficient in a way that, you're trying to come up with your own finances and trying to just like gather whatever you can. So
yeah.
is there any way, when you were in college or in high school, that you were like working maybe multiple jobs at a time to sort of just provide for yourself and save up and to really just like it's like a do or die type of situation for you?
Absolutely. I only knew survival mechanisms. I only knew growing up how to work multiple jobs to make ends meet and piece it all together, just so I barely had enough. And that was the mentality I grew up with, the scarcity mindset. Nobody taught me, financial literacy or how to make my money grow. And so all I knew was just paycheck to paycheck,
Mm.
get jobs here and there, and survive. And so that was what I knew, and I carried that lifestyle through me. And so aside from that, I still kept other visions, big visions, close to me at the time. I had, goals and aspirations, even when I couldn't fully picture it. I wanted a better salary, a better life. I wanted stability. I think those were things that were values that I deeply craved. And so if you're a young person listening to this, or somebody looking for, stability, that was something that I deeply valued and craved. And I made it an effort to put that as a goal of mine, and I made it a priority to say one day I'm going to have stability, and whether it's finding a home where I'm not moving around, because growing up I moved around a lot, to having a salary where I feel comfortable every month. There were different levels of what that looked like for me. And so I think if you're a person listening to this, you need to think about what are your values, what's important to you, and hold that vision close to you. Hold that thought that it is achievable, because I had to coach myself many, many times by myself with the help of a mentor and just trial and error. So, like I said, there were many times where things didn't work out and I had to get back up again and try again.
Wow. So I feel like, when you grow up with so much uncertainty around you, and as you said, there were so many, like your mindset was not the best as well, which I can imagine, honestly speaking. Um, growing up with so much uncertainty around you, it's difficult to deal with it. And I feel like it forces you to mature pretty early on in life. So do you think all of this problems around you as a child, it forced you to like mature at an early age?
Absolutely. There were many times where I would look at my friends and their problems weren't the same problems I was
Mm.
experiencing. They had a very, I wouldn't say immature, but they had a more jovial kind of outlook on life. And they just kind of could relax a little bit more. They had like this landing pad, a cushion of their parents there to support them if they were falling. And I didn't have those support systems in place. If I fell, I had to hit the ground and get back up. Whereas other people around me, they had different landing pads where they can have the, different support structures in front of them. And I still see it till this day. There's nothing wrong with that. And there was nothing wrong with my upbringing. They're just two different upbringings, right? And so I always was told growing up by adults, because, I was quite mature. I always had friends that were older than me. I always had people around me that said, wow, you're very mature for your age.
Mm.
So yes, I definitely had that feedback mirroring to me. Yes, you are older than, you act older, or you're way more mature than your own age. And so that in its own respect got me opportunities throughout life.
Did you ever see that as sort of like I wish I could preserve like my innocence a bit longer, just not grow up so fast. I wish I didn't understand things the way I did. And if it naturally it forces you to overthink and worry a lot about future scenarios, about everything going on around you. So do you ever wish you sort of had that safety net of like being a child and just being kind of carefree?
I mean, there definitely is a time in my life where I felt like things were unfair. Yeah, I definitely
No.
felt that way, and I had a lot of resentment towards certain elements of my upbringing. But as you get older and as you start doing inner work, or coaching yourself, or continuing with mentorship, you realize like your patterns carry on with you throughout life. And so I'm a person that always likes to take action and question, and I'm always curious about why am I behaving or thinking or experiencing things over and over again. And so for me, I saw patterns and I said, I don't like what I'm seeing, whether it's how I react to things or how I interpret things. And so to kind of answer your question, I did at one point wish I had preserved that a little bit longer, but then I'm also really proud of the woman that I've become, and I couldn't imagine my life being any other way and having had the path it had. And so I think everything happens naturally for a reason. Um, Even when we're aware or we're not aware of things. And so now that I have the awareness of, the last 36 years of my life, I'm able to consciously create my future self and think what's happened. So now I can get on a path of what I actually want. And so this is kind of like a twofold answer of like sometimes, or I did at one point, but now I'm in a place where I've accepted it and I've appreciated those lessons so I can move forward and create what I actually want.
Amazing. So growing up, in your childhood, if you did sometimes have a bad day or you're just like, I don't feel good, I'm just mentally, I'm not in a good space, or everything around me gets too much and too overwhelming. Did you have anything to turn to, like a comfort show, maybe a movie, something you just always went back to sort of like really feel good about everything again?
I definitely think at different stages of my life, there were either different people or different outlets to turn to when I emotionally couldn't handle something. Um, I would turn to my mom for certain things if I felt comfortable. She was definitely a person that I sought a lot of validation from, or an ego boost from. Our parents are our parents at the end of the day, and we always want them to be proud of us, or we want their advice because we think their advice can sometimes be the best advice, or it just makes us feel a little bit better about our situation because they love us just a little bit more than anybody else. And so for me, I always sought my mom's love and affection in ways that I felt comfortable doing so. And now, nowadays, I definitely turn to, activities that I truly enjoy, whether it's fitness, or I work on my own podcast, or I go and spend quality time with people that I care about, or I go and just watch something funny. So I definitely know different ways to boost my self-care. And there are certain people whose energy, when I'm around them, I know I'm going to feel better, even if it's just for a little bit of time. And so nowadays, I have a dear friend of mine. She lives on the other side of the world in the US, and we talk every week. And I definitely feel like right now, in this phase of my life, she is that person I go to in this moment in time where I can talk about anything and everything if I'm having a bad day or a bad week or whatever that could look like.
So, do you think at one point, as you grow older and you sort of gain this understanding and maturity, your circle that naturally affected your circle of friends? Because naturally, when we grow older and we gain that maturity, it's like, I'm too tired. I'm too drained. I don't want these kind of people around me. This is what I want. This is who I want. If I don't get this, I'm fine being by myself until the right people come to me. So, what are your thoughts on that? I'm really like interested in knowing because us as teenagers, a lot of like kids in uni as well, they're kind of suffering from this phase of loneliness that it seems like never ending for them, honestly. So I'm really curious on like how you see the whole situation.
Yeah, definitely. So, like I said, I definitely think I come from that like last generation of actually building connection with people, social skills, before all the social media. And like social media, although it has wonderful elements to it, it can, as we know, has some detrimental elements to it where it creates that isolation, that lack of human connection, isolation, all of those things that you may hear about with mental health issues and whatnot. And so I would suggest that even though it might feel uncomfortable, to definitely build connections, whether it's through classmates or people at your job or people maybe in your, if you live in an apartment building, your neighbors, people in your community, or find a hobby to connect with people. And if you don't know what that is, that's a whole nother conversation, but figure out the ways for you to actually have in-person human connection with people, because as humans, we're not wired to be alone. We're actually programmed to build relationships with people, friendships, family relationships, romantic relationships. We are not wired to be on our own. And I think social media can be that wedge to divide all of those things. And so if it's any consolation for you, it can feel uncomfortable. I completely understand, because as the older I get, I definitely, my circle of friendships have shrunken, but that doesn't mean the quality has gone away. It's actually improved. And so if you become more clear on the kind of person that you'd like to become or like to be, my best advice is to surround your people who are already doing those things. For example, if you want to become an entrepreneur, surround yourself with entrepreneurs. If you're into spirituality and self-care and wellness, surround yourself with those kind of people in person, as much as possible, to build some relationships with those kind of people. And as you will slowly see, the more consistently you show up, the more consistently you'll build relationships with people, whether it's for a lifetime or just temporary, but you'll see the quality of yourself, your personal self, and those relationships will increase as well.
That's such an interesting perspective, navigating your way through, I want to say, a toxic environment or toxic household, especially because most of our, like, I want to say 18, or depending, I'm just going to say 18, most of our life we spend with our family. And when that sort of foundation is unstable, it kind of messes with you mentally. You either gain resilience or you just go through hell, basically. You hit rock bottom and you're like, I don't know what to do. So navigating your way through a toxic household when you're prone to like adapting to other people's emotions, I think it's a huge challenge. I think at one point, I'm assuming it was for you as well. So how did you sort of find your way out of that? Like, what made you sort of stay grounded and stay resilient? And do you ever find yourself, even at this like current stage in your life where you feel safe and secure, do you ever find yourself going back to like those old patterns or those like old fears that you had at any point?
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely, um, I'm human. We're all human. We catch ourselves thinking, the worst possible scenario. And that's just our fight or flight mode response to a situation. We're feeling triggered, we're feeling threat of some sort. And so, of course, our nervous system wants to react to survive. And so that is a natural response system that you've cultivated time and time again. And once you understand what those triggers are, you become aware, number one. And number two, you can find coping mechanisms to help you work through that. There are so many coping mechanisms, whether it's through somatic therapy, there's so many meditations out there, there's EFT tap, like there's so many things that you can do once you feel triggered. For me, it's my mindset. It's how I talk to myself, that internal dialogue literally all day long. Because if you have those conversations in the shower or while you're driving, or that conversation that you're thinking about having with a friend and you're kind of like, it didn't even happen yet, but you're thinking about how it could be,
Mhm.
like all those things, and you reloop it over and over again, those things can manifest. And so for me, I'm really catching my internal dialogue of one, how I talk to myself, how I'm conversing with people in my mind before something happened or after the fact, those conversations I have in the shower, etc. So I'm really, really catching myself and coaching myself through why am I even thinking that? Like, why did I go to that negative place in the first place? And saying, like that didn't even happen. So if you can catch yourself, if you can catch how you talk to yourself, how you think about situations, how you think about yourself, and really work on cultivating, more love and compassion to yourself, it's not going to be easy at first. I will tell you, when I first started that journey, it takes a bit of discipline. And if you're willing to be disciplined and really change your thought pattern around, it can be really beautiful on the other side of that. And you'll start to be more aware of really beautiful things and grateful for what has happened to lead you to now. You obviously listen to this podcast, so something in your awareness is bringing this conversation to you.
Yeah, I was really interested in talking to you about that as well. Unlearning like these negative thought patterns and toxic behaviors and like overthinking, especially, it gets so draining and like terrifying at one point. Like you're aware of it. Many people, they have this awareness of like, okay, this is my problem. I worry too much. I overthink too much. And then they're like, okay, I'm gonna try and stop it. But our brain or like our ego is like, no, that's change and that's discomfort. Let's go back to feeling terrible again and miserable again. And so it's kind of like repeating the same negative cycle over and over again. So in your personal experience, when you were growing up and you gained that sort of awareness, how did you deal with that? What did you do to really like sort of get away from that victim mindset and that sort of despair that you had for everything around you?
Well, I did everything in different stages and steps. I wouldn't say go and tackle all of this at once. Um, Again, we're in a different stage of life for myself. Like when I was a kid, I didn't have the same access to internet and resources when I was younger. So I would say I would turn to obviously a trusted family or friend at the time who maybe was older, wiser, could give me some wisdom or just advice on how to move forward. Again, be careful with that. This is a person that you really should trust, to the point where they're not judging you, where they are empowering you, right? Because sometimes people place their own opinions and they place judgment on your situation, and that can be detrimental. So I would say if whoever you're talking to, that it is somebody who's a good listener, who's going to be, empowering you, reminding you of your value and your worth, helping you see mental blocks that you have, if you have any, and help you see a different perspective on the situation or yourself or whatever it is. Another way is if there's something that's just itching you, you'll know like internally, like, oh, this thing's bugging me. Let me do some research on it. And you can go down your own rabbit hole of finding really helpful information to help yourself overcome different challenges, whether it's mentally or, physically.
So when you finally made the decision of moving and leaving your life in LA behind, I was really, again, once again, I was like enamored by the fact that you said you were, we can say you were judged a lot. There were a lot of questions about why, and basically there was no support system, as you mentioned in one of your posts, that you had no support system. What is it like to go through so many struggles, being there for yourself, because sometimes you just can't turn to people, or people just don't have the same understanding or perspective as you, with having yourself and sort of being your own therapist and pulling yourself out of that deep dark hole that you're in without any support system? What is that like, and how did you sort of deal with all of it?
I learned to become my own best friend. And that was the simplest way I can put it. I remember I was actually around 25 or 26 years old when I heard a woman who was living in my apartment building. She was my neighbor and actually a coworker. I was already here in Dubai. And she said, "You need to learn to become your own best friend." And those words never left me. And I didn't know what that actually meant or looked like. But I will tell you this, that it is your own personal journey of how to figure that out, right? And so ever since then, I made it my personal mission to honor myself. What does that look like? If I don't feel good about something, I don't do the thing. If I
Mm.
feel overwhelmed with something, I put a pause in it and I do it when I can actually do it. If I feel excited, I express that excitement. I'm authentic to myself. And so that is what being your own best friend means. If there's something you have been desiring to do, in my case, that was going abroad, um, I definitely, honored that desire, right? So it's being your own best friend. And so when it is difficult times that one has to deal with, figuring out how to take care of yourself during that difficult time, because everyone goes through difficulties. They look very different for everybody. And so it's just, again, coaching yourself, learning how to, take care of yourself during that very vulnerable time, and relying on yourself that you have your own back no matter what.
Wow, that's profound, very deep, on a deeper level. So I just want to ask, before we move on to your current, things going on for you. So this part of yourself, this part of you that went through all of this, went through a tumultuous childhood, went through incredibly high, a lot of highs and a lot of lows. Was there a time in your life when you finally grew up, you were in your 20s, where you like, was there a time where you tried to run away from the side of yourself because you just didn't want to associate yourself to this version of you, this older version of you that was kind of chaotic, went through a lot of chaos? And have you finally, like in your at your current age, have you finally made peace with that version of you? Or do you sometimes, based on past experiences, slip up and maybe judge yourself a little here and there?
Maya, you have the best questions, and I
Oh
absolutely
my
am
God.
loving this conversation. So, yes, um, there were many times where I felt like if I just go and do this thing, or I go and live here, if I go travel there, I'm going to feel better,
Mm.
right? Like many of us think we're going to escape our problems if we go get on a plane and go somewhere else and just vacation there for a week. We're just going to feel better. And yeah, that will bring some temporary relief. Yeah, that can definitely do that. But another thing that I heard from somebody as I, was getting older and maturing and going through my personal and professional life is you take yourself wherever you go. You still take all of that negative self-talk, chaos of just, how things were from your past and your childhood with you. You don't even realize it. So many people are unconscious of all of those, beliefs that are hardwired into their, thinking and nervous system. Like it's all programmed. I'm sure you can research all of this. And so you do take yourself wherever you go. And it's just funny how I'm having this conversation because I was one of those people that was always seeking relief. Like I was always in so much like despair and agony about relationships with people, whether it was a professional relationship, a romantic relationship, etc. I was always trying to seek relief in some way because I was in agony. I was in pain. I didn't know how to cope with it. And I just thought, oh, I just want to escape and go, I don't know, to Bali, and I'm going to feel better. And when you get to Bali, I promise you, you're not going to 100% feel better. You might even feel worse because you're still taking yourself with you. And so until you learn to work through the inner work, it's not easy. Like I said, it does take time. It's not a 1 or 2 day process, and not even a 1 week process. It's a lifetime process for you to work through any challenges from your past that have traumatized you, um, or that you keep rethinking about. It takes time to work through those, or it can be quick, depending on your choice, right? Like you can choose to get over it, or you can choose to wallow in it. And so we just need to keep reminding ourselves and coaching ourselves that we're our own best friend. We can get through it, and we can choose. We always have the choice to let things go and make our situation better for ourselves. We have the choice.
I think when it comes to like the whole traveling aspect, I think it's more about seeing things you've always wanted to see, seeing places you've never seen before. It's kind of acts like a distraction. And then once you get back to the place, which is like your home or whatever, and it's associated with you feeling kind of just terrible. So it kind of catches up to you. And maybe for a fleeting moment, you're like, oh, maybe life is worth living again. And then everything's all fun and exciting.
Yeah,
Anyways, so yeah, so your career in counseling, I want to say it's extremely like specific because you help students with their well-being, financial support, you help them navigate which college they want to go to, all that kind of stuff. So you extend your support in almost every area. So were there any past experiences or like an aha moment that made you want to be like, this is what I want to do. I want to help people. I feel like this is my calling.
absolutely. I remember when I was a student myself, in college and university, and I was on a study abroad trip. And mind you, I worked my bum off to go on that trip, because financially it was quite expensive. And it was just a 1 month or 2 months summer abroad in Italy. And I just remember feeling so much gratitude to be able to go and experience traveling, one, to a new place, and two, being with my peers from my school and a professor and learning about a culture, studying Italian, getting some college credits. And I was just like, everybody needs to experience this. This is so cool. And I made friends there, and I got to see and experience a whole nother world and culture and traditions, etc. And so for me, that was a very pivotal point in my journey to become a counselor, because I was like, I want to help other kids study abroad. And I just knew that that was something really beautiful, that experience. And I just knew it put me on a path to um, figuring out what I wanted to do next. And had I not done that, I don't know where I'd be today.
Amazing. So I take it you're like a traveler, you enjoy going to like explore new places and stuff like that. So can you tell me some of your favorite places you've traveled to?
Oh, I mean, I can't just pick one. I will say this, I never thought I was, like I said, a girl coming from a single parent household where money was tight growing up. And if somebody is hearing this and they feel like I want to experience the world and see the world, I never thought I would travel to over 30 countries that I have to today. And 30 may not be a lot to some people, or that might be wow to some others. But I will say that everywhere I've gone has had its own charm, its own beauty. But if I really had to pick, if I had to really, really pick, I would pick probably Switzerland, and Bali's not a country, so it's Indonesia, but Bali, the island, or maybe Melbourne, Australia. Those were probably some of my favorite travels.
Ooh, nice. Amazing. So I've seen your okay, I want to say I've seen like your past work experiences. I was like, let me do some research. You could literally fill up like two, three big pages of like what you've done so far. So if you could, in like just let's do it like in a quick, could you give us a quick rundown of everything you've done so far? Just make it as quick as you possibly can. So let's see if you remember everything you've done so far.
As a counselor.
Yeah, as a counselor, where you've worked, where you've studied, all the exciting things.
Okay, well, I studied at California State University, Long Beach. I got my bachelor's and my master's there. I have my master's in student development and higher education. It's a counseling degree. But while I was doing that, I was also a student advisor aide. That was my very first counseling job that really helped hit the nail on the head that I wanted to become a counselor. And then I did many, many, many other things after that. I was a college to career advisor. I worked for nonprofits, helping, low income students stay in college and figure out the next steps of their life. And I also then transitioned into the international world, and I worked in a few different international schools as a teacher and a high school counselor.
Amazing, exciting. All right. So this brings us to the final part of our episode. We're going to play a little game.
Okay.
So I would like you to mentally prepare yourself. Okay. It's called Then and Now. So what this game entails is that I'm going to be asking you questions as a counselor, obviously, but you have to answer as a student. Back when you were a student, it's like a blast from the past. You have to go back in time, you have to think, and you have to answer. All right. Okay. So here we go. Okay. So as a child, did you do things that you tell students not to do now?
Am I supposed to be then or now?
No, it's like I'm asking you as a counselor, but you
Oh,
just have to think like back when you were a student, did you do any of these things? So back when you were a student, did you do things that you tell current students not to do?
absolutely. I was a teenager, so we make silly mistakes at that age.
So how rebellious were you as a teenager?
I would say on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being very rebellious, I was probably like a 3.5, 4.
Okay, what's the most rebellious thing you've done?
I had a house party when my mom told me not to have a house party.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, what is something you did as a student that your parents don't know about to this day? You're like the only one who knows about it.
I I think it was that same house party. I had friends over doing shisha, and the coals fell on the floor and melted the linoleum. And I had to get it like kind of, yeah, I had to like try and like even it out. And I lied about it to my parents.
Oh my God. Okay. So when you were in school or uni, did you ever come up with just a lie to avoid skipping, avoid not going to school or uni as a whole? I feel like uni gives you more freedom to do that, but did you ever come up with like a lie on the spot to just avoid working?
Probably, but I don't remember. I really can't remember if I gave a very good lie. I mean, there's so much flexibility if you don't show up to class. They may or may not notice at university. So I'm sure I skipped a class here or there.
Yeah, so last question. Have you ever cheated on a test before?
No, no,
Oh,
no, I don't think so. I don't think so. I don't think
interesting.
so.
Okay, interesting. Well, that brings us to the end of our episode. Before we finish, do you have any words of wisdom, or as I like to call it, wow, words of wisdom? Anything you'd like to share, any message you want to give out? Just look into the camera and just say whatever you want.
Well, like I said, just if you have, goals for yourself, hold your vision close to you, work on your mindset to help you see the possibilities. And three, take action every single day towards those goals, towards that vision. Even if you don't see that much progress, keep going.
Amazing. And how are you feeling after this conversation?
Fantastic. I feel so energized. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you, all of you, for watching this episode. Thank you, Miss Katrina, for joining me today. If you enjoyed it, like, share, subscribe, all the exciting stuff. I will see all of you in our next episode. And remember, our prime example today, it is important to know that it's okay to not be okay, and you will eventually get through it, even though life may have other plans, but you will get through it. Thank you for watching. Bye bye.